Bon dia, Cordia. Hi, everyone. Eimear Burke here. Welcome to another Fireside Chat. And this is Fireside Chat 147. So I'll just start as I usually do with the prayer for peace. Gomara Siakon ar fud na crunne. Gomara Siakon in our jaili agus in our jira. Gonairi lin len ar cuj garmacha. Gamwich buichas jeev. Jeh chuvdaka is spirit chuvdaka. May peace prevail on earth. May peace prevail in our homes and in our countries. May our missions be accomplished. We thank you, guardian spirits and guardian deities, for peace. As the fever of day calms towards twilight, may all that is strained in us come to ease. We pray for all who suffered violence today. May an unexpected serenity surprise them. For those who risk their lives each day for peace, may their hearts glimpse providence at the heart of history. That those who make riches from violence and war might hear in their dreams the cries of the lost. That we might see through our fear of each other a new vision to heal our fatal attraction to aggression. That those who enjoy the privilege of peace might not forget their tormented brothers and sisters. That the wolf might lie down with the lamb, that our swords be beaten into plowshares, and no hurt or harm be done anywhere along the Holy Mountain, with thanks to John O'Donoghue. So let me see where people are. West Yorkshire, a bit cooler today. Actually, I was on my bike and the sun was shining, but we've had some thunderstorms recently. Sunny Utah, lovely. Texas, grey London again. Sorry to hear about that. Queensland, Australia. Hi, Joan. Or Linda, sorry. Glastonbury, Belgium, New York, Italy, ciao, Calgary. It'll probably rain Calgary. I love that. And Penzance and Cornwall, Chicago, Illinois, brilliant. Just lovely to be here. Cloudy Slough. Yeah, it's there's storms brewing. West Yorkshire, Texas, brilliant. Let's see where more people. Great. Where are we? Suddenly rainy. I love these descriptions. Suddenly rainy South London, grey Southern California, steamy. Where is it? Steamy South Florida. Brilliant. You're getting really good with the. This is Phoenix, Arizona. You actually got some rain this morning. I bet you that was a blessing. Flanders, Belgium. So it's lovely to have you here and to be back again this week. I was away last weekend, but I left you with the story. Cloudy, Hertfordshire, and sunny Northamptonshire. So this evening, Ballina, Killaloe, thunder and rain just starting. We've had a little bit of it earlier. So, and Catherine says, I hope no storms tomorrow, visiting Holmfirth tomorrow. Well, good luck. Gloomy LA, which is a huge relief. Okay, so we've got positive reactions to our weather and then not so. Thundery Central Ireland. Brilliant. Hi, Sean. Anyway, so listen, we're going to Glasgow this evening. And I'd like to introduce my guest, Nick Fuller. Nick, it's so lovely to have you here this evening.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure, Eimear. I can't tell you how it's... and I'm always so very touched by the prayer for peace. It seems so important in these times to just be bringing that energy into the world. Yeah.
Yes, it's a hard task, but hopefully somehow, I suppose we can never underestimate the power of prayer and the power of intention. These things never happen at the pace we'd like, unfortunately. So hopefully something comes of it. So tell us about Glasgow. Actually, my mother-in-law was from Glasgow, but I don't know it. I've only kind of driven through it, but never actually really stopped.
Yes, well, I mean, I'm not from Glasgow originally, but I'm sure we'll get into that. But I've lived in Glasgow for about 10 years, and I've lived in Scotland for more than half my life, but I'm from England originally. So I'm here in my little hut in the garden, which is sort of a little bit of a druid retreat. In the west end of, well, the west part of Glasgow. And there's a fashionable west end of Glasgow, and I'm not in the fashionable part. So I'm looking out of the window and I can see across my garden there's a big tower block where there's a lot of refugees and asylum seekers live there. So we live in a very diverse
Okay.
community in this area. Yeah. And just adjacent to, so I live in Glasgow here with my partner Simona and our 10-year-old son and my stepson. And just adjacent to where we live is a kind of field which has got some trees, and there's a bit of a kind of community green space, or we're trying to, put that energy into it. And I've made a labyrinth there in the past, which is probably something that we'll get on to talk about.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So what took you to Glasgow from England?
Well, it wasn't a direct move. So I've been generally, as my life has progressed, working my way up the British Isles. So I was born in London, but I was brought up in Southampton, and I come from an ecclesiastical household. My dad, who passed away earlier this year, was a Church of England vicar. So I was brought up with my brother and sister in Southampton, in a vicarage, a very large vicarage next to a graveyard and a church, and so a very strongly Christian household. Not in a strict way, and my parents were really very kind of open about kind of encouraging us to find our own paths. And I think from a very early stage, I never really connected with or felt at home with the Church of England or really Christianity. But what brought me to Glasgow and Scotland? Well, I trained to be a nurse, so that's my kind of profession. Is I'm a nurse, and I did my nursing training in Sheffield, so that I kind of started working my way up the country. And then by the time I'd finished that, I really have always had a very strong connection with nature and being outdoors and doing adventure and making journeys out of doors. And by the time I'd finished my nurse training, I had come to the conclusion I really didn't want to be a nurse and wanted to be a roughy tufty outdoor instructor. And I did do that for a while. And that path took me eventually to Edinburgh, and I did a postgraduate course in outdoor education. And that was in 1994. And I've lived in Scotland ever since, so in different parts. Eventually, I went back to nursing and trained as a counsellor. I've worked in various different fields in nursing, but I kind of specialised in addictions and substance misuse, and worked with people with injecting drug users and people with alcohol problems. And then got into education, and that's what I do now. So I teach at the University of the West of Scotland, and I teach nursing and other related health topics.
Great. Yeah. I'm curious as to why you left the roughy tufty life and back into nursing.
Well, really, there wasn't really a career in it. I was finding, there was a lot of kind of seasonal work and sessional work, but it wasn't really making a career of it. And I eventually, I suppose, initially drifted back to nursing because it was convenient and it was the profession I had. But then I found my kind of my path in it. And when I started, I worked in intensive care for a few years and endoscopy and medical. But when I got into the sort of addictions field, I really found a niche that I really connected with, and I worked in that field for 15 years, and I've got a kind of research interest in that area as well.
Okay, so. I don't know if you know, I was a nurse too.
I did know that, yeah.
And then I went to Africa to save the world, and I realized it wasn't for me.
Yeah.
I went with my best friend, who at the time who is an adrenaline junkie who can make quick decisions. You know, she's the kind of person who loves A&E and all that intense stuff, and put me in palliative care. Had I stayed in nursing, I'd have gone into palliative care. I'll help you die. I'm not going to kill you, but I will stay with you. But don't ask me to save your life. The responsibility is too much. And then I went into psychology. So, and the interesting other thing is I live in a Church of Ireland rectory with a graveyard next door and a ruined church. Just interesting, these little things. Gabriella says, went off to save the world and ended up saving myself. It took me a long time to save myself. I certainly didn't save the world, but it was a tough experience, but I learned a lot from it. Sean McCann says, a nick of all trades and meaningful ones at that. That's lovely. And Sean Clanton says, a wonderful calling to be such a multidisciplinary healer. So, and then Ricky Gellison says, yay for, he says nurses, and I don't know if that means man nurses or that was a typo. So it'll be just. So tell us about what I suppose your path into Druidry, and I suppose I'm interested in what's your landscape like now? I know you live in Glasgow, but what is the landscape that calls to you or connects you with your Druidry?
Okay. I mean, do you want me to? We can talk about my path into Druidry, or is that? Yeah.
So I asked you many questions. I think it was the multidisciplinary piece that got me. So you can take one question at a time.
Yeah. All right. Well, because I mean, I'm always interested in other people's paths into Druidry, and I suppose because we live in a predominantly non-pagan society, most people, unless you happen to have been brought up by sort of pagan parents, there's always an interesting path. And for me, as I've said, I was brought up in a Christian Church of England household background. And I went to church. I was in the church choir. I at some point realized that this was not making any sense to me, and I suppose I'd always had I think my mum, despite her very deep Christian faith, probably saw something in me that connected to an older form of spirituality. I remember I looked it up actually because I thought we might talk about this. In the 1970s, it was in 1977, the stones at Stonehenge were fenced off, but up until that time, you could go up and see the stones. And I was taken, I remember I must have been about 8 or 9, taken to, my mum took me a few months before they were due to be fenced off, because this would have been the last opportunity to go and see Stonehenge before it was going to be, kind of, you'd only then be able to see it from a distance. So yes, I was aged 8 in 1977, and that had an immensely, I mean, I can vividly remember that experience. I remember being awestruck by the just these very impressive, the solidity and the majesty of these stones, and later on, probably a little bit later on, maybe a couple of years later, I was taken. I lived in Southampton, very near Winchester, and went to see the Mizmays, which is of a turf labyrinth that's several hundred years old, and it's cut into the turf of St Catherine's Hill near Winchester. We've got a picture of it there, haven't we? So do
you want me to show it?
Yes, bring that up. Yeah, that's it. So wait a minute, let me see if we can bring that up. Hold on. Well, that's not fully showing it, is it? Wait a minute. Oh, I know what we need to do. I need to put that on. There we go. That's it, isn't it? Is that better?
Yes, that's perfect.
Yes. So that's the Mizmays, and I suppose the way I think of these things is that there were various seeds that were planted. And I think a lot of people have this experience that there were seeds that are planted in childhood or adolescence that then come to fruition much later on. And this was my first encountering of what I later learned to be known as the labyrinth. But I didn't understand that at the time. I didn't really have an understanding of it. But again, it was one of these experiences that lodged in my consciousness. And I was just very intrigued by, you can see on the left there, the photograph of the Mizmays, which is cut into the white chalk down, very narrow paths cut into the turf. And then on the right is a sort of diagram of the design itself. So I remember being probably about the age of 9 or 10, clambering up St Catherine's Hill and finding the Mizmays and just being incredibly intrigued by it. And I think it was only one occasion, but it planted a seed that then sort of took hold much later on in life. And there were other things, I was an avid reader, and I remember reading the Dark is Rising series of books by, I think it's Susan Cooper. Is that right? If I've got the author right.
Somebody will tell us.
Someone else will tell us, and it's a kind of very vivid depiction of a kind of old religion and kind of pagan spirituality, told from a child's perspective, and that had a great influence on me. So I'll stop there.
I just want to come back to this Mizmays.
Yes,
it is Susan Cooper. Thanks, Ferdiad. How old is this maze? Or it's a labyrinth?
This maze is several hundred years old. I can't remember the exact. I think it's about 400 years old, or something of that sort.
And do you think that's the oldest one in Britain?
I'm not sure if it's the oldest one, but it's one of the older ones. Yes, there aren't any ancient, sort of 1,000 years old labyrinths or anything.
But that might have been the first labyrinth I heard about. Getting ready for 2000 to celebrate New Year, Howard and I wanted to have some kind of ritual, in addition to having a glass of bubbly wine. And I was surfing, as you did, with a remote control for television.
Yeah.
The good old days. And I came across this. Will I close this off now?
Yes. Yeah.
We can come back to it later. And it was a documentary, a BBC documentary on turf labyrinths. And I thought, that's what we'll do. So I have a labyrinth outside. We did it for New Year. So, and that was 2000. And then I had read Lauren Artress's book on labyrinths, and she said, please build a labyrinth to mark the millennium. And I thought, I've already done that. Isn't that brilliant? Wonderful synchronicity. So, brilliant.
Yes. So then I suppose I embarked, as many people do in my sort of late teenage years and onwards, on something of a spiritual quest, really, and a quest that eventually led me to Druidry, but via investigations into Buddhism and the philosophy of Rudolf Steiner and shamanism. And I trained for many years in shamanic practice. I trained as a shamanic practitioner, doing shamanic healing and ritual. And I gained a huge amount from that, and a great deal of insight and knowledge and perhaps a little wisdom. But there was always a sense, I suppose, that it wasn't of this land. The teachings, the shamanic teachings that I had come across were very informed by Native American tradition, and I have immense gratitude and respect for the Native American teachers and elders who I've had the privilege and the benefit to be to gain from their teachings. So primarily it's got North American Native teachings, and then kind of Siberian shamanism and so on. And at the same time, kind of parallel to that, I guess I was in loosely in spiritual circles and groups, and there was an awareness of, I had a kind of broad awareness of the wheel of the year, and I know I'd also much earlier when I was at university, I'd kind of investigated Wicca, and I remember buying a book called Wicca: The Old Religion in the New Age by Vivian Crowley, and I think,
Okay, yeah.
and being, but of course this was many years ago, prior to the internet and so on, and so I was reading these books, and I didn't know where there was anybody else who had these interests. I didn't know where I would find another Wiccan. So it was all very, kind of solitary pursuit, really. And it felt very somewhat edgy, I suppose, because I'd come from very kind of Christian background, and my dad was a very kind of accepting sort of person, very open-minded, but he was not that open-minded about ideas of witchcraft and Wicca and so on. So I really felt that this was something that was quite sort of edgy, and so yes, so the exploration of shamanism eventually, and various people I met along the path had mentioned Druidry, and then later Obod. And I have to say, until relatively recent, I'm very new to Obod. I only joined the order a couple of years ago, really. And prior to that, various people I'd met had mentioned Obod or were members of the order, and it sort of suddenly made sense, really, that I suddenly understood that the Druids were the shamans of the Celtic peoples, and actually that was what I was looking for. And I know this is very much a cliche, but it's probably because it's true. I did have that experience of kind of feeling I'd found my home when I came to Druidry.
It is a cliche, but it's a cliche because it's true. So many people say that. I have said it. Yeah, I hear it all the time. That's wonderful.
Yeah. And I think because the teachings are both accessible but also very real and very deep, and I've never met a druid who I don't like. People are so genuine and generous, and it feels like a very warm family to be part of.
Oh, brilliant. So how would you say Druidry, you say you're a Druid a few years now, what impact has Druidry had on your life? How has it supported you?
Well, in immense ways. So I think it's just really deepened. I mentioned how at a very early age I felt a great connection with nature, and that's been a growing feeling that I've had. And in my younger days, that took the form of needing to do adventure. Well, I still like that very much, actually, doing adventures in the wilderness and so on, but perhaps with maybe a different mindset. But I think Druidry gives some structure to that connection. So by placing nature at the center of my spirituality. It really gives a kind of framework within which to make sense of everything else. As a Now, I often think about the fact that there's no ancient kind of written texts that explain Druidry, and we can puzzle about that. But actually, the texts are out there to be explored in the woods and in the mountains and in the rivers, and so I'm more and more connected with the wisdom that's out there in the natural world, and understanding how as humans we're not separate from nature, we are part of nature, and that's an understanding that I'm coming to more so, I think, as I've explored Druidry. And I suppose the other side of it, particularly, I mean, I'm now somewhat through the Ovate grade, but I found the Bardic grade very helpful and foundational, particularly, and I've never particularly thought of myself as a poet until, I mean, I had written poems from time to time, but somehow connecting with the Bardic teachings gave me the freedom to explore my poetic voice, and I'm hoping that I can share one or two of my poems this evening.
Absolutely. Would you like to do one now?
Well, why not? So actually, let's go back to yes. Well, let's talk about the labyrinth a little bit, and then I can bring that into.
Do you need to show one again, or
what's
just
that?
Let me know. Just let me know when you want to bring the PowerPoint up again.
Yeah, sure. Okay. So prior to quite a bit, probably 10 or more, 15 years ago, I rekindled this interest in labyrinths, and it came about because I was reading a book by Glennie Kindred called Earth Wisdom, which is a beautiful book that takes you through the wheel of the year and gives advice and suggestions for ceremonies and rituals for the different pagan festivals. And in this book, for Beltane, and I don't particularly know why she connected the labyrinth with Beltane. I don't think there's a particular connection necessarily, but she suggested that making a labyrinth would be a great thing to do at Beltane, and there's a little diagram of how to create a labyrinth. And that was my first encountering of the labyrinth as an adult in my adult life. But so that seed that had been planted when I was a little boy, suddenly started to germinate. So I used to, at that time I was living near Dundee in Forfar, and I used to go to a woodland, and there was a disused quarry, which when I started going there was full of rubbish and junk, and I cleared it physically and kind of energetically, and used to go and sit there and meditate. And one day I was meditating there, and I had a vision of a labyrinth, and because it was a disused quarry, there was lots of rocks lying about. So I had this idea, and I got some of my friends together one day, and we I'd made this diagram, and we built a labyrinth. And I used to go there, most weeks, pretty well every week, and it would be a place of spiritual practice. So that was really the start of my path of working with the labyrinth, building labyrinths, leading labyrinth walks. I've trained as a labyrinth facilitator and also as a labyrinth healer, doing Melchizedek labyrinth healing with Tony Christie.
Yeah.
So this, and I've now sort of really become a labyrinth nut, really. A bit of a labyrinth nut,
but a very nice nut. Because I've experienced your workshop as well. recently.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, that was a wonderful thing. We made didn't we? We made a candlelit labyrinth
Oh, it was just beautiful.
ceremony. Yeah, which was really lovely. So I got into the labyrinth, and then last year I made a labyrinth pilgrimage. And I one of the things I love to do is cycle touring, and I ride on a recumbent bicycle, just a lying down bicycle. And
I can't get my head around that. I have to be up and looking.
well, it's very comfortable, and you see all around, and you don't have the stiff shoulders and the sore bum and the stiff wrists.
I'm
and
not
so on.
convinced. I
No.
have to try. I'm not convinced.
Well, there's
Anyway, go
pros and
on.
cons. There's pros and cons, and it's very slow going up the steep hills, but it's very comfortable. So I've been riding my recumbent bike for about 18 years or something like that. Anyway, and I've been all over the place, Morocco and Greece and Albania, lots of places. Anyhow, last summer I made a labyrinth pilgrimage on my bike from Glasgow all the way to Iona, and I found out where the various labyrinths were on the way, some of which I already knew about and some of which were new to me. So I've been writing poems, one for each of these labyrinths. I'm not going to share all of them, but I will share some of them. So one of them is the labyrinth that I built in the field that's just behind where I'm speaking to you from.
Okay.
And that is, and let me see if I can get that ready on the screen. Wait a minute. I'm jumping about actually because
that's okay. I can see what you're doing in the green room through the bed. Go. Is that it? Do you want me to show it up?
Yeah, let me just yes, there we go. Right, so
that's we've got the Miz there.
I've put it up on the new one. It's called the Homie.
Okay, you need to. That's it. Yeah. Yeah.
You got it now?
Yep.
All right. So the story of this labyrinth was that this is the field that's just beyond the flat where I live, and it was the winter before last, very frosty day. I went out with my wellies, and I just walked the labyrinth. I just created this labyrinth in the frost. And then we went away for Christmas and came back, and the frost had melted and the labyrinth was still there, but it was sort of an area of flattened grass. So I kept walking it with my wellies, and it turned into a mud labyrinth. And then I kept walking it, and then the grass dried out and the soil dried out, and it turned into a kind of dried mud labyrinth. So it took on a life of its own, and it became.
So just interrupt you. So what you were walking on is where you're not walking on the green, you're walking on the brown. Is that it?
I'm walking on the brown. Yeah, I was walking.
So that's your footprints on. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And so it's walking. I'm walking into this frost field, into a blank canvas, if you like, where there is no labyrinth, but I'm imagining the labyrinth. And because I know the form of the labyrinth, I'm walking it and creating it. Wow. And then it took on a life of its own. And then eventually I realized that we wanted to keep it, but it wasn't, because it had never been designed to be maintained. It was just a spontaneous thing. We really wanted to be able to mow it, to keep it.
Yes.
So the sizes were wrong. So I had to make the decision to let it kind of die and then to rebirth it. So I'm actually on Saturday going to rebirth it, but so we let it disappear, and it's going to come back again. So it's got this transitory existence of flickering in and out of existence. And
I love the magical shape of it, because I mean, I know from my own labyrinth, it's had different iterations, the same shape. Yes. But it's hard to maintain, and now it's maintainable now, but it took years of working, trying different things.
That's right.
To do that. That is beautiful. I just love the close up. It's like because you can't see the overall shape of it, but and I'm just fascinated that you walked that of course, you obviously had a very clear mental image
Mm,
of the labyrinth to be able to walk it in such a way that you knew what you were doing.
mm,
It's
that's
beautiful.
right. Yes. And yes. So I wrote this poem. This was the first labyrinth that I visited on my bicycle pilgrimage. So the poem's called Homey. I'll read it now. The field is called the Homey, by the way. That's why it's called Homey.
Okay.
First, trampled into winter's frozen grass, a piece of spontaneity stamped upon the earth. Next, mud churned with broken booted resolve, becoming permanent impermanence. Then, raked and trampled, firm in summer's drying sun, valiant against turf's constant incursion. What is this ever-changing subversiveness, this gentle guerrilla gardening act that dares to offer its soft, yielding resistance against the bleak concrete multi-angularity rising unconquerable from the earth? Perhaps, when glimpsed through smeared glass above, the liminality of this ancient grassy form emerging from the earth is the mystery of hope.
Oh, it's just beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. Wow. Absolutely incredible. Wonderful.
Yeah, and the sort of last reference really is that you can see it from that tower.
Yes.
You can look through the windows, and sometimes they're not very clean, but you can look down and see this labyrinth, and it really means something, that perhaps this simple but very ancient archetype, this
Yes.
archetypal symbol, that has so much depth of meaning and layers of significance, maybe that touches somebody in a significant way.
Is this on your private land or is it public?
No, it's a public field that is open to anybody, but it's not very widely used. It's just
Okay.
used by
That's
dog
my question.
walkers and
Okay.
people walking from one side to the other. But there's a number of us who are trying to create a bit of energy about making it a more homely sort of place to go and have more caring for nature in there and so on.
And do people walk it? Apart from your
Well,
friends?
yes, so they did, and then, as I said, I've let it go into
die. Okay.
let it die, and then it's going to be rebirthed in a more maintainable form. So,
oh, wonderful, wonderful,
yeah.
wonderful. Brilliant.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. Yes. Oh, do you want to show more now?
Well, why don't I take you to the west coast of Scotland?
Okay, on a screen or just with your words?
Well, with both. So
okay.
You asked me about, what's the landscape, what inspires me, and really the place that inspires me most is the west coast of Scotland, the ruggedness, the beauty, the uncompromising nature of that landscape. And so on my labyrinth journey last summer, my journey took me to Bute and St Ninian's Bay, and there's a labyrinth
there. Is that
there.
where the cave is? Is that where St Ninian's Cave is?
I do not think so. I'm not. Someone will probably tell us. I'm not sure where St Ninian's Cave is.
I've been to St Ninian's Cave, and I've been to
Right.
Bute to a jazz festival many years ago.
Yes.
Okay.
St Ninian. So the St Ninian's Bay. There's a promontory, and this is the photograph that I took of it. And the labyrinth you can see is in the foreground, and it's barely noticeable because there's got this very thick tufty grass, and there are sheep, and there's the island of Arran in the distance with moody clouds and very atmospheric, and the labyrinth is formed of these vivid white quartz rocks that have been gathered from the shoreline. And it was built by two women who lived nearby during lockdown, during the COVID era. And actually one of them kindly took me and showed me where the labyrinth was. So it's got a very kind of elemental feel in this place. And I was very struck by, it almost seemed like the labyrinth encapsulated the dance between the sea and the waves and the shore and the land. So I wrote a poem called St. Ninian's Bay.
Lovely.
And I'll read that. A sweep of grey-brown sand leads towards the dark angularity of some abandoned house, reclaimed by the low headland's untamed wildness, now the preserve of sheep. The tide heaves high against the shingle, whipped by the wild southwest wind into an effervescence of tangy spray, air and water's momentary coupling, spilling against the rocky shore, forever frozen in the milky brilliance of white quartz, becoming points of crystalline purity, now precisely placed amongst the tussocks, a luminescent sacred form conjured from the dull russet, salt, and a gull's haunting cry, bringing still liminality to the ceaseless dance of time.
Oh, just beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. Ferdiet says, Arran is one of my favorite places. I did one of my Druid initiations there rather a long time ago.
Yes. Well, do you want to take the slide away and we can
Okay.
see? Yes. I was in.
We have a few more minutes.
Yes.
I tell you what I'm telling my viewers today. We're having an experiment. So in a few minutes, we're going to go over to the Druid Heart for OBOD members. And we will continue our chat with Nick. And there'll be an opportunity for you to ask him questions. So I haven't done this before. I hope it works because the technology is all new. Anyway, continue. There are just some comments. Labyrinth seem to be an earth-related form. I wonder if we could have one with a bit of water in it and how walking in that would feel. It's an interesting question.
I know of a labyrinth that is, actually someone sent me a photograph of a labyrinth that was half in the water and half out of the water. And another story of a labyrinth was, must have been 11 years ago when Simona, my partner, was pregnant with our son, Magnus. We went to Butte and I made a labyrinth. I thought the tide was going out. I was actually wrong. So I made a temporary labyrinth in the sand and we both walked it, and it was to kind of give blessings to our child that was on his way. And as we stepped off the labyrinth, as we emerged from the labyrinth, the tide came in and started to cover up the labyrinth, and it was just a beautiful lesson in impermanence and, you know, like those sort of sand mandalas that the Buddhist monks do. Yeah. So yeah. But I was wanted just to bring I suppose a connection really between the labyrinth and the Druidry, really, because it occurs to me that you know, it's not just by accident that there's such a resurgence of interest in nature spirituality, paganism, and Druidry. You know, it's happening for a reason, and you know, probably there's so much disconnection in the world, and certainly I found that, you know, Druidry has been such a powerful path to reconnect at all levels. But I found this quote from Jeff Saward, who is a very well respected labyrinth historian, who said, throughout the long history of labyrinths, whenever and wherever society is going through rapid change and development, the labyrinth has blossomed. Now, humanity is seeking the sure path of the labyrinth in an uncertain and confusing world.
Wow.
And it really occurred to me that there's a lot of resonance between, the renaissance of interest in the labyrinth and the great developing interest in nature spirituality and paganism and druidry.
That's lovely. And I think that we will call our chat on this platform to an end, and we will move over to the Druid Hearth. So members who have already signed up, please join us there for another conversation. And to the rest of you, sorry, it's been lovely to have you, and I will look forward to seeing you next week. So the rest of you, I'll see you on the hearth. So good morning, good afternoon, or if you're listening to or watching a recording of this, I wish you all the best until we meet next week. Okay, I see Ferdy's still waiting for his invite. Hopefully you'll get it soon. We're trying to, in tranches to get people onto it. Just go into the hearth, Ricky, and you'll see a banner, a live show going on. The quote, who said that?
Yes, so that is Jeff Saward. So that's Saward, and he's labyrinth historian, labyrinth maker. Yeah.
Okay, I see there are many people waiting to get to the hearth. Sorry about that. Anyway, fingers crossed. It is about being patient, because this is a huge undertaking to get us all signed up to the hearth. Anyway, I will see you next week for those who are still waiting. Slán go fóill.
Bye-bye.